Right, let's make a start, shall we? Welcome to the School of Social Entrepreneurs. This is our social media marketing webinar. It's part of our Recover and Rebuild webinar series. So it's just part of our efforts helping the sector to get back on its feet. We are recording this session just to make you all aware, and we put it live on the blog page afterwards. I will send you out a link to the recording so you don't feel you need to make scrupulous notes. You can watch the recording back. You'll also find previous sessions there that we've run before. So there are things like managing cash flow, how to run a successful crowdfunder, lots of great resources that we're building up on this blog page. Let me introduce myself. I'm Helen Mincher. I work for the School of Social Entrepreneurs in Yorkshire and the North East. I have a background in marketing, working previously for online corporates, and I focus now on the social enterprise space, working with a couple of different folks on their marketing, on their strategy, and on their social media. Now, I am delighted to welcome today a group of folks from Not For Long. They're part of a collective people that were furloughed from an agency background and wanted to look at how they could put their skills and their time off essentially to good use. If I can introduce Dan to you just to share with you a bit more about Not For Long and what their aims are, and just some of the content that you'll hear today and what it is that they're looking to build, and then we'll get started with the main content. Donald, if you could just flick through to the next slide, please. Great, and then Dan, over to you. Would you like to introduce Not For Long, please?
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, sure. So as Helen sort of said there, in a nutshell, what Not For Long is sort of a group or collective of marketing and advertising professionals who are either furloughed or in between work, or just want to really volunteer their time during an incredibly sort of stressful period and trying period for small businesses. There's obviously a statistic sort of projected that 1 in 5 small businesses may go out of business due to COVID-19. And really what Not For Long is set up to do, I set it up with 2 other people from my agency that I'm on furlough from. It was really set up to use marketing and advertising theory, tactics, techniques to help stem the sort of flow of dying businesses, I suppose. And it's been sort of a great journey so far. I've been doing it for the past few months, working on sort of bespoke client projects, but also doing things like this, sort of webinars, workshops, and creating these handbooks, which Donald is going to take you through the social media marketing one that we've created. But there's probably going to be around 6 or 7 of these that focus on different facets of marketing. So we've got a content strategy one later this week, which we're also presenting with SSE. But then we've also got things covering sort of SEO, CRM, paid media, etc., which should be coming in the near future. So I guess one thing that I would stress before I pass over to Donald about these handbooks is they are designed as such, as handbooks. And as well as the sort of session being recorded, we'll make sure that sort of Helen sends around the actual PDF so that you can go through them at your own leisure, because there are loads of tools and resources in there, and bits of it are quite text heavy, so you might want to go through that at your own leisure. But Donald, who I'm going to sort of be passing on to, is one of the sort of expert volunteers who helped put together this particular handbook, and he's going to sort of help take you through the handbook, and now is probably your chance to ask questions of him of some of the content that is sort of in the handbooks. So yeah, I guess without further ado, I'll pass over to Donald. It's amazing to be here, and it's great that so many sort of businesses have responded to this webinar, and yeah, just excited to see what you think.
Thanks, Dan. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping before we kick off. Just a reminder to please do keep yourselves on mute throughout the webinar. If you do have questions for Donald about any of this great resource that he shares, do pop them in mute, and I will collate them and either ask as we go along, I'll ask them as we go along, or I'll collate them, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. But yeah, these are really great resources, and I'm really great the guys are here to share them. So Donald, over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Dan. Just bear with me. I'm just going to see if I can swap the documents over. How's that look? As it should?
I can still see the slide, Donald.
I think there might just be a little bit of lag time with it. Yeah, we can still see PowerPoint slide. That worked for a second, whatever you did there. Yeah.
There we go, perfect.
Lovely, thank you for that. Grand. Yeah, as Dan said, this handbook is designed to be read and refer back to at your leisure. I won't be going through every single word. I'll go through it top line, but try and make sure we cover all the main points. I just wanted to touch on and reference obviously the other handbooks that Dan mentioned too. I heartily recommend them. It's really useful to read them all or have them all as a suite and build up your learning in all these areas and use them together. So just on the social media marketing one, it's 3 elements really. There's social media, there's marketing, and there's marketing on social media. Social media, you'll know from your personal life, you'll use some, maybe all the platforms that we'll talk about, and have an opinion on the ones that you don't use and why. Marketing, people you'll be on varying degrees of knowledge of, but your strength will be the knowledge of the areas where you're setting up or your operation. Now, you probably know this, but I'm going to remind us all of one fundamental of marketing that some people get wrong or muddled about. So you can keep it in mind as we get into the presentation. And that is, businesses perpetually need new customers. So you should prioritize attracting them ahead of selling more to existing customers. And whatever your niche, new customers are your lifeblood. You need those new customers just to stand still, never mind grow. Customer loyalty is a bit of a myth. People will be interested in your offer for a time in their lives, but it's unlikely to be forever. But the buyers in your category, in your space, also buy from other brands in the category, and the flip of that is your opportunity as well. And therefore, the purpose of either making great content or paid promotion or both is getting new customers in as fast as possible. And you can try out advertising or paid advertising with relatively small amounts of money from like £10 sterling. So I'd really say just certainly don't ignore advertising, paid advertising as an option. And bringing those two things together, marketing on social media. Normally, we would do plans for one client, so the answer would be tailored. As this is intended for businesses of all sorts, we can't really tell you what to do. We can tell you how to do, and ultimately you'll have to decide for yourselves what's right. So please use the links and resources at the very end of the documents that Dan referred to learn the best practice on the platforms. We use these ourselves. Even better, also look around at who's doing well and see what ideas you can steal for your business and try them out. Learn what works for you and make up your own rules. So start moving into the presentation, hopefully. Here we go. The reason that everyone's interested in social media platforms is because so many of your potential customers are out there using them. Whatever your niche, there'll be one or more platforms that are right for you to meet the people that could become your new customers. Now, one bit of reality to remember is that the main platforms allow or force you to move into doing paid advertising so that you really increase the number of people that your brand reaches. That will take time or money or both. So just be prepared for that sort of investment. But we want to just outline some of the general principles here so that you can feel more confident and do it for yourself. Now, all the buzz about social platforms is that they have new and exciting features, but that's also daunting. All that change is daunting. What is good about them is that they have evolved into paid-for advertising platforms and machines. And if you know how to buy advertising or buy media and do that kind of marketing, you know how to do it on social media, because it's now just like marketing everywhere else. We've got some options and techniques for you here that will hopefully be useful. One of the key things to mention about social media platforms is the role of algorithms. You'll know this yourselves from purchasing on Amazon, where it recommends new things to buy, or Netflix that recommends new movies to watch, etc. The algorithms are controlling what people on the platforms see and interact with. The big platforms like Facebook, for example, they really control what everyone sees. You know this because you get the same stuff from the same friends. They effectively control and narrow that ability for brands to reach too many of their even existing people and getting beyond that. So they really forcing brands and businesses down a route of paid advertising. That's the best way to break out of talking to the same people over and over again. The algorithm is also obviously looking at how much engagement people are giving to your content. The more that people engage and interact, the more likely that the platform will deem your content to be interesting and therefore worth spreading on. So you can get beyond it, but it's a big effort to make that sort of content. They are pushing people into the paid space reach, so it is worthwhile keeping some budget to experiment in that space. This is a kind of classic marketing funnel, and social media can operate at any end of it. You can talk to your existing fans and followers at the bottom end of the funnel. You can introduce new products, get feedback, etc. It's very useful for that. At the top end of the funnel, around consideration and conversion, that's where paid advertising or paid pushes of promotion, of content comes into its own. You can try and get your new customers in at that point. We'll just go into some of the areas of social media marketing that we want to cover off. The objectives that you set yourself, the resources you might have, the platforms that are out there, the degrees of commitment that you might want to make to the platforms. A short piece on content marketing, but don't forget about the content marketing webinar on Thursday. And the last but not least, the wonderful world of measurement. So setting your objectives. This is a general set of objectives for pretty much any business, almost of any size, but particularly true for small businesses or small operations. It's absolutely about increasing profit or increasing turnover, and that's by adding new customers. And you'll achieve that through reaching as many potential new customers as possible and communicating how your brand meets customers' needs, either through content or advertising. You'd want to explore your resources. You want to set out a plan of how you're going to approach your social media marketing. Set aside some time to plan it all out. You need some time for community management and reviewing and replying to customer comments. When it comes to content production, you might have a hard cost and a cost in time that it takes you to make the content as well. Paid advertising, that certainly you want to set a budget for that. And you want to set aside some time as well, use some of the content measurement tools, measurement tools for how your content and advertising is working, that we've got links to at the very end. Just be honest with yourselves. I know some of you are in slightly bigger teams, but yeah, just try and set aside or plan for what time you think you'll be able to devote to your marketing efforts. Because you need to be realistic, because you'll be wearing many hats, and this shouldn't override everything else you want to do. So just set aside realistic times. Just a bit on the social media platforms. One thing I also say is it's a space that changes very quickly. Facebook is the biggest player now. It wasn't always that way. They bought Instagram because it was up and coming. Other biggies are Twitter and LinkedIn, Pinterest. 2020 has seen the rise of TikTok. What we really want to just make the point here is it changes all the time. Platforms go in and out of fashion. Audiences move around. New generations want to do different things. New entrants offer different niches, different services. So please, it's not to overwhelm you. It's just so that you look at each of the platforms somewhat dispassionately, so that you can adapt to new ones and see whether they will be more or less relevant to you, and that you can move on and leave the old ones behind. Just looking at the big six, Facebook is the reference. This is where people put their whole life on the internet. It's the largest, most diverse platform. It's got people of all ages, of all types. And that's what makes it wonderful for targeted paid advertising, because probably on Facebook, people are the most transparent about who they are. And therefore, you can target the most relevant people on Facebook. It also offers the opportunities to sell directly with Marketplace and Shopper. Instagram, in comparison, is slightly smaller, and as you know, this is where people show off or curate only the most attractive parts of their life. It skews a bit younger, and it's got great options for targeted advertising, and it gives you the option to sell directly, which is great. Twitter, smaller again. It's all about being on the pulse, in the news, but the news, these topics, they can be divisive. So if that's a space that's relevant for you, great. But if not, leave it out. People on Twitter often don't give too much of themselves away, and that anonymity means it can be a little bit hard to target with advertising. Just bear that in mind. TikTok is new, lots of fun, lots of great entertaining, fun video, music, dance. Majority of users under 25. If that feels like it would be good for your brand, yeah, get on there. They've recently introduced options for paid advertising as well. LinkedIn is the business Facebook. This is where people look after the career, job, etc. And because people are accurate and transparent about that aspect of their life, you get good options for paid advertising, really well-targeted work there. Last but not least is Pinterest. It's where people plan fun, beautiful things, and the audience there is primarily homemakers. Depending on your market, you might have options for selling and advertising on there. Now, this is just a little grid just showing some stats on each of the platforms, the sort of core audience there. Now, these figures are global, so please, you might need to use some of the resources at the end to dig in and find out the exact details for your market. I won't dwell too much on this. I'll leave you to look at that at your own leisure. Just a little bit on Facebook. Just as a sort of catch-all, really whatever your business, you will likely find your audience on Facebook in good numbers. It's the simplest and easiest one to engage with fans and followers, and also try out paid advertising. People's profiles are rich and genuine and easy to target. You can also sell, as I mentioned. And we probably say, like, at minimum, have a presence. If you're on there, things to include would be key images of your product, service, link to your website, other social media accounts, your store address or link to map, your opening hours and contact details, just to make it easy for people to connect with you and buy from you.
Donald, can I just ask a question on Facebook? So we've had a question come in. You've mentioned the algorithm there, and Wise Guys Training has just noted that about over a year ago, there was a change to the algorithm on Facebook, and it was kind of widely understood that groups, you should prioritize groups over pages. Facebook was prioritizing those via the algorithm, so people were more likely to see the content in groups than they were in pages. So the question is this still the case? So kind of outside of paid advertising, is this still the case, that focus on groups rather than business pages? And any other tips for kind of navigating that algorithm on Facebook?
Actual pages. Well, I might give Dan a shout on this, like, while I think about it too.
Do you say, sorry, the question is, should you preference a group over a page on Facebook?
Yeah, so there was it was understood that about a year, 18 months ago, there was a stated change to the algorithm on Facebook, whereby groups were being prioritized over and above business pages. Yeah,
I think that the main change was more so that if you're a business, for instance, and this buys into what Donald was saying earlier around Facebook is essentially an advertising platform. If you imagine it as like a really big TV, I suppose, that everybody's sort of on. They made a change which obviously preferenced personal pages or groups. So if if I'm Dan Salke and I have my own page which has friends on it, or I'm a public figure, for instance, they preference those over business pages like a Nike or an Adidas or a brand page, essentially a business page, because they want to force those pages, or not force, but encourage those pages to have paid reach or paid spend. So yeah, whoever asked that question, that's completely right. And there was a change to an algorithm that caused that. Just a quick point on groups. From top of my head, there's not masses of sort of paid advertising or advertising capabilities with sort of Facebook groups, but they are a fantastic way of sort of nurturing a community, if that makes sense. And for a lot of the guys on here, I know a lot of your projects are community based, and you do rely on sort of a tight-knit community, local community around your businesses. So that could be a great way of sort of keeping people engaged, but it's definitely not a way of going after new customers, if that makes sense. The best way, like we said earlier, to go after new customers is to allocate sort of a portion of paid advertising spend. Well, there are also, some organic features that you can use to do that, but I would recommend doing that on other platforms. Facebook as a platform is primarily going to be it's geared towards paid spend just by the beast that it is, I suppose, and how it works based on that algorithm talk we had earlier.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Dan. I think, Donald, you'd mentioned there needs kind of the option to try that lower end, that kind of entry level boost if you're new to paid advertising to increase reach. What was the question on that? He mentioned it's often worth doing lower end boost to try and increase your reach and gain new customers. I don't know what the question is around that, but just kind of the only point I'd mention around using that boost functionality is just if you're going to run the post first, let that organic reach, give it a while before you then go and hit the boost. Otherwise you will pay for all that reach that you would normally hit.
To go anyway. Yeah, indeed, agree with that. And I think what's interesting, so to the question of Facebook tweaking the algorithm to prioritize user content basically rather than brand content, they certainly sold that to everyone, to all the users, as them getting more relevant content. You want to hear from your friends and your family rather than brands. And this is kind of the thing that everyone needs to, from the business end, needs to bear in mind is that we need to charm our way into their lives and earn that time to be heard, because people aren't interested. As much as you want to think that your service or product or organization is fantastic and it's doing great things, and it's really, people are busy. People want to do other things, and they want to hear from their friends, not brands, and that's the consumer friendly version of what Facebook have done. The flip is exactly what Dan's talking about, and we've been sort of referencing here, is that if you want as a business and not as a person, you need to pay to get out of the people that you normally talk to. They're always tweaking that algorithm, and it's always with the view of creating the conditions for businesses and brands to be forced to pay for the privilege of reaching people. They're a very efficient money-making machine. Instagram is kind of similar in the options that you might have to target people. They have the same dynamics with the algorithm, etc. We just say that maybe not all businesses are a natural fit for Instagram. Some are, some aren't. Some maybe seem really obviously good, and others less so. Glamorous things like fitness, yes. Less glamorous things like solar panels, perhaps not. But that's not to say that there are any hard and fast rules about it. If your audience is on there, go for it. We'd certainly say, at minimum, take the handle and secure it. And there is an option for selling on there, which would be good for some. Things include key image, link to your website, again. Twitter, as mentioned before, really it's just about being on the pulse and being active and on it, staying up to the speed of the conversation. If that's for you, great, but otherwise it's a lot of work and maybe not the rewards that you might get on other platforms. And it's difficult to target with advertising because people aren't necessarily totally transparent about their full identity. But at minimum, do take the handle so that someone else can't take it. Things include link to your website, your location. Just thinking about how much you want to commit to any of these platforms. Now, you want to maximize your impact rather than dilute it. And if you're active on every single platform and doing bespoke things, it's a lot of work. And it makes it hard to identify what's going to work for you. So you might want to think about dialing it down on some and concentrating on others. But if you're already up and running across a number and it is efficient for you to do that, don't throw your existing audiences away. This is more for people starting out, trying to focus their efforts. So three degrees of commitment: passive presence, where you set up but don't use the page profile or handle very much. An active presence, where you're putting out content and engaging with people, and being an active advertiser, where you're actually paying for adverts or boosting that content to drive people to your page or profile, website or shop. So passive presence, why have it? Well, just, you never know what you're going to do in the future. Stop someone else from taking it, and it certainly looks your business look that bit more proper and legitimate. If you do have a presence, do remember that you are going to have to administer some queries and comments and keeping your information up to date, etc. You can usually hide, mute, or make private, and that's worth doing if you're not going to use it. But it's good to have all the handles. Having an active presence, putting out content. This is also great for talking to the people that are in your network, in your community, in your groups. It's talking to people that you already know. That content can be very useful at positioning your brand as an authority and enhancing your status, etc. Great for talking to your existing customers about new products or services, or asking them questions and feedback, that sort of thing. You obviously do bear in mind that it will be mainly your friends and existing friends and fans, etc., that see you. It's hard to get beyond that, but that would be the holy grail. If they like what you're doing, then it gets out beyond beyond your friends and fans to their networks of friends and fans. Just remember there is time and effort involved in being active and converting those fans or followers into customers. Don't expect to reach large numbers of people or build those fans or followers quickly. It's a slow process. What counts is customers. But if you're doing it, do ensure that you're active rather than letting it dwindle and become looking like a passive account when people go on it. Almost better to make it private than dead. Being an active advertiser where you're paying for ads, this is just a guaranteed quantifiable way to reach the potential customers with your brand message, either as an ad or as boosted content. You can be very targeted. It's fast. It's scale. That's appropriate for you. You can be as targeted as you like, particularly on Facebook. Really high degrees of targeting on that, and that can be then a relatively short customer journey where you're taking someone straight to your product or service, telling them about your website or your telephone number or your physical location. You have the ability to start small in terms of budget, and you can test different approaches to see what works and then scale that up. And certainly, when you're advertising, it again can make your brand look that bit more proper and enhance your status, and you do get good quick feedback. You get immediate results. Remember to monitor the costs. Remember to monitor the effectiveness. Obviously, figure out what works and do more of it, and do less of what isn't working. And what counts is customers, not the fans or followers. Now, just a piece on content marketing, and a reminder that there is another handbook, another webinar on this in much more detail. Heartily recommend tuning into that. Some things to think about that will be covered a bit more, but obviously you need to know about your brand, what you want to say about your product and service, the benefits and reasons to believe, and how they're going to be relevant to your audience. You really can't stress this enough. It's just get to know your audience as much as possible. Whatever your niche is, get close to it. Learn everything you can about them, talk to them, research them, ask them what their interests are, so that you can learn about them and develop insights that will help you understand what makes them tick, and then where they're hanging out, which social platforms they're on, and what they like to do, what they find funny and what they engage with, etc. And that will guide you in developing your content themes and how you'll organise and plan your content pillars, and create your calendar. And it'll inform how you create your ads if you go down that road, and figure out what the single most important thing you can say about your service and where to buy, etc. Then you've got your visual identity and your distinct tone of voice. These are brand and marketing basics, but just to underline the point about knowing your audience, what makes them tick. Because if you can do that, you can create engagement. Being informative, interesting, funny, just like in real life, are really good starting points. The more followers, the more engagement you get, the more followers you get, the better the chance of spreading that to their network. Business to business, if that's relevant for you, those sorts of sales they can often be quite slow burn, and putting out content that positions you as a thought leader or a face or a name in that space can be really useful in keeping your prospects warm. And then creating a calendar is really important, and this gives you structure. And if you invest the time in setting this out in advance, it takes the pressure off you day to day. And really just make sure you're thinking about the themes that you want to talk about, so that you can think about organising the content in advance rather than on the spot and worrying about what you're going to do. Think about all the big moments in your audience's calendar and everyone else's calendar. Religious festivals, summer holidays, school holidays, bank holidays, all these kind of things, sports seasons, you name it, shopping, fashion seasons, anything that's relevant in your market, or big cultural moments that come up, map them down. And that also can give you the freedom to react to unplanned things, and you can do something more spontaneous as well if you've got that structure already in place. Set the frequency for how you're going to post. Again, this will depend on the business you're in, the platforms you're on, and what your audience is interested in, and at what time of the year. The other thing is just how much time you've got available as well. That's always a constraint. You can automate some of the posting, but there are some guidelines from each of the platforms on what's kind of expected, roughly. But you can explore that at your leisure from the links at the end, and delve into that a little bit more. Facebook is probably, the expectation is the least amount of posting. Instagram a bit more, and Twitter is obviously more about pace and currency, so be prepared to write a lot more there. And in terms of what you post, just like anything in life, just shorter and sweeter is better. Taking the time to write a short letter rather than a long letter usually pays off in terms of getting people's attention, because they are busy, they are interested in all those other things, that discussions with their friends and organising their lives. So if you're going to try and charm your way in, try and make it as short and sweet as possible. That said, sometimes you can break that rule, and if you want to write something that's really interesting and useful and charming that's longer, do that, and it will stand out a bit more.
On the posting side, sorry, there's Facebook and Instagram, and to some extent LinkedIn, have different types of formats, so stories and the grid. Is there, how do you know what to use to post? And is there benefits to using both in terms of boosting the algorithm?
I would say you just try it out, because there's not going to be one rule for everyone. It will depend on your platform, the platform of choice, your audience, and your brand, and what seems to work for you, and the type of content that you want to create, to see what's going to work best. And I think that would be just a thing to reiterate, is just try it out, experiment. Nobody's going to, the worst that happens is nobody even notices it. The best that happens is people love it, and you can then do more of it. And that's that willingness to experiment and learn for yourself what works for your brand, your organization is a key thing. In terms of boosting the algorithm, the honest answer to that is I don't know, and I'd probably refer back to just saying try things out and see what happens.
I understand on Instagram, and so this may well be the case on Facebook, that it should. So if you're posting on your grid, then posting stories at a similar time does help ensure that post is seen. But I think that's probably due to the fact that you would want to reference that new post, so you're just reaching new audiences through stories. And then just a last question on posting, Donald, are there, someone's mentioned Hootsuite and using tools such as Hootsuite to help with your scheduling and so on. Are there any negatives, anything to be aware of if you choose to use one of these scheduling tools to help you with posting?
I suppose the only thing there is really that you lose spontaneity, but I think beyond that, as a time poor entrepreneur or person wearing multiple hats, time management is critical, and that can make your life easier and more efficient is good.
Yeah, I would just add as well, I mean, the obvious negative is that to unlock the sort of more premium features, you obviously need to pay for tools like Hootsuite. So if if it's not something that you're going to use on a day-to-day basis or use to the best of its ability, then that's the negative. Maybe you wouldn't want to invest in a tool like Hootsuite. You might want to just do it manually. And there are actually some content calendars later in here, which are like free content calendars we put together, which you can do manually if you don't want to pay for a tool like Hootsuite. But overall, they're fantastic tools and can really help you sort of up your social media game as a whole, on the whole. So I'd recommend looking into them if you haven't had a look at them already.
Right. Just a little bit on hashtags. They're obviously the basis of search on Twitter and Instagram. Less relevant on Facebook. It's good to have a few on there, but don't necessarily overload it. Maybe up to 6. Be quite good, but it's whatever's, again, relevance for your audience, your brand, and what seems reasonable at the time. But piggybacking on things is grand, but it is good to maybe set up your own as well that you can start to own. But yeah, do watch out that if you think about the trends that are out at the minute, they're not all necessarily going to be your friend. Just be very careful about trying to piggyback on the wrong things, and Twitter's, again, is the big watch out there where it's all about news and currency and news and views, and sometimes those views can turn against you. It's not always the best. Little touch on paid for promotion. We've been talking about this throughout, and as Dan said, that there's a separate handbook on this. The best thing you can, or the most guaranteed way to reach beyond the people that normally see your posts and content in any big numbers is to use paid advertising or paid boosts to content. You can start small. I think that's the thing to reiterate as well. You can start small. Again, this spirit of experimentation, try it out, and if what works, great. If not, then you've learned something. Maybe try a slightly different tack. But keep going. Keep learning. It's certainly the way to reach lots of people quickly, and it is effective. As we touched on, if you find out that content that you've posted has been getting a lot of engagement, and as Helen says, just leave it to make sure that you're giving it enough kind of clearance, if you like, see how it works, and then if it has worked well, give it a boost. Or create some bespoke advertising, get right to the point about why your brand is great, and direct them straight down the funnel to purchase or to sign up for, find out more, etc. Just touching on measurement, and there are some of the KPIs, the key performance indicators that you might look at. Now, we've sort of prioritised some of the ones that are most relevant for helping you reach new audiences, but there's also ones in there about understanding how well your content or your ads are performing. look at them all together and in relation to your objectives. No one is going to give you a go or no go guidance. You need to interpret them all to understand exactly what's happening. So, for example, like with paid Facebook, probably the top one to look at would be how well you're performing on paid reach, which is a measure of how many people, it's the quantity of people in your target audience that you're looking to reach that you're actually getting. Similarly, organic reach, that's the same, but just that you're not paying for. That's putting out your posts and content. Engagements, percentage of what proportion of your audience or people that have seen it are engaging, liking or commenting. And then you could look at your fans gained versus lost and what the net is. The comments, reactions, and the general sentiment. Are people broadly positive to you or less so? What traffic you're getting and likes and shares. In Instagram, very similar. Just how much uptake there is as well on use of hashtags. Twitter, the same, but it is more about retweets, replies, likes, engagements, and whether you're gaining and losing followers, your sentiment. If you can discern that, you might want to look at some social listening tools, some links at the end, use of hashtags, etc. Little glossary of some of those terms. And then I'll just fly through just some of the tools and resources, including Hootsuite, that you can look at your leisure. Later, I'll just show you what's there. There are great how-to guides for all the platforms. There's some things on audience insight and then news and trends. Big shout out to We Are Social. They produce some great content on a regular basis that you can sign up for as well. And then there's links, relevant links on how to work Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and TikTok. That will just help you get through all the various stages of building up your pages and developing your advertising or paid promotion boosts. And again, as we mentioned, some specific Hootsuite and Sprout resources. So thank you very much for that, and I'll hand back over to Helen.
Donald, thank you. I'm conscious that some of you may have to drop off. It was a 45 minutes webinar, but we do have a couple of final questions, Donald, if it's okay, just to put them to you and Dan. One from Wendy on hashtag research. So how do you find the best hashtags and the right hashtags for your business? So any tips on doing that hashtag research on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm actually happy to jump in and take this one, Don, because it's actually something that I was asked about a couple of days ago by one of the businesses that we're working with. I guess the simple answer is there's obviously no like magic science to it. It's obviously a test and learn procedure, but there are definitely tools online which you can use to help you find the best hashtags. Two in particular which you can have a sort of a little look at and search, and you can sort of type in your so for instance, imagine you're a dog grooming business or something, you might type in dog into this hashtag search, or like, dog grooming, and it'll come up with the best 30 hashtags. One of them is called all hashtag. So if you type in all -hashtag into Google, you should be able to find it. And then there's another one which is called Keyhole, which should also help you find it. But those are all sort of analytics tools, and sometimes you may have to pay for them as well. So have a look at those. But I think some of the core principles of using hashtags is, you can have up to 30 of them. We'd recommend only having between 2 to 5 or 2 to 6. You don't want to spam them. That's what we sort of put in the deck. And then in terms of choosing the best hashtags for your brand, I think the most organic way to do it, or the best way to do it, is look at other brands that you sort of rate and respect, or other brands that are in your industry who have a good following on social media. And immediately you can just look at sort of the hashtags that they use. What are the hashtags that they're sort of interacting with? And you can sort of pluck some of those. And I think looking at some of the sort of influencers as well from within your sort of industry again. So, you know, if you're a fitness and lifestyle brand, looking at sort of fitness and lifestyle influencers could be a good way to go, or fitness and lifestyle brands that have a good following. Looking at the sort of hashtags they use is definitely a good start. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've sort of left off. I guess, yeah, again, like testing and learning is the best way to do. I guess going for the most popular hashtag isn't always the best way to go. So for instance, like hashtag love on Instagram, or like hashtag photo of the day is obviously a massively popular hashtag and has loads of people following it. But if you're looking to be discovered through that hashtag, your chances of doing so, if your account is quite small, is obviously quite slim, because you're competing with loads of other people. So sometimes it's actually better to hedge your bets and go for a less popular hashtag, but that is quite relevant to your brand or your product that you're selling. So hopefully that sort of answered the question.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think that's great advice, kind of that competitor research piece, really key. And just that mix of kind of broad hashtags and narrow hashtags, location-based hashtags, content-based hashtags, time-based hashtags as well. So kind of just trying the different types of hashtags.
Yeah, and again, we kind of mentioned Sprout and Hootsuite as tools for sort of planning, but they've actually got some really good blogs and tools on there which can take that a bit further. I know I've definitely read one in the past which goes in quite niche detail into hashtags and sort of the logic behind which ones to use and the sort of system behind it. But yeah, hopefully that sort of answers that one.
Yeah, thanks. And worth doing that research, I think, if you're looking to grow your account engagement there, it's worth kind of investing that time up front on doing that hashtag research. And then, as the guy said, just that kind of testing and iterating and evolving it.
Yeah.
And Hani asked for any affordable recommendations for scheduling tools. So we've mentioned the bigger ones. I don't know if you found any that are more affordable, or actually if anybody else that's still on the webinar can just share what they use. Actually, that might help Hani there. Just any kind of ones they find affordable and useful.
Yeah, again, I'm happy to answer that because it's another thing in the same conversation I had about hashtags I was sort of talking to a client about. Yeah, I think the reason we've put in Sprout and Hootsuite in there are because they are, in our opinion, the best, and also not ridiculously unaffordable, especially if you're a small size business. So the way that they set their pricing out is based around the amount of accounts that you want to analyze or follow or have attached to that Hootsuite or Sprout social account. So I'm off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly how much it is, but I think if you're only, which most of you guys will be, if you want to only look at one account, or I think it's like up to 5 accounts, you can go onto the base level versions of those, as well as the sort of free versions of those. So, and it depends exactly what I've seen sort of Jess mentioned there. It depends exactly what you're trying to use it for. If you're trying to use it as an analytics tool, you might actually need to start paying a bit more, and you might want to invest in it a bit more. But if you're purely using it as maybe like a base level planning tool, that might be useful. Like we said, we've included as well, if you are really just trying to use a base level planning tool and you absolutely don't want to look at Hootsuite or Sprout Social, we've included a example content calendar, which is basically, we've created that through sort of an Excel spreadsheet, which is in this deck. So when that's sent around, you can sort of click through on that and sort of have a go at doing it yourself if you really want to. But yeah, I mean, I can see a few of the examples these guys are sort of putting through. All of these examples are sort of great tools. And yeah, of course, you can use sort of the free version of some of the apps that we've suggested. But of course, if you want to unlock all the features, you're going to want to pay a little bit.
Thank you. I'm going to draw this to a close. I'm conscious of everyone heading into their next Zoom meeting, but thank you guys. Thank you so much, Donald, for sharing, kind of going into depth around the resource that you've created, and Dan as well for joining. Really great to have you with us. This is part of a 2-part marketing focus. So Thursday at the same time, 1 p.m, there'll be a follow-up session to this on content marketing. But thank you all for your engagement. Thank you once again, guys. I will share around an email with a recording to this after the session and a link to the playbook. But thank you all, and we shall see you soon. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.